Hello everyone, this is Scott Restivo with Crow Canyon. We're just getting set up here to get on the SharePoint training for NERC Compliance Session 2. Give us a moment or two to get things going here, and we also will waiting for others to join. So we're right with you. Thank you.
Hello, Scott.
Oh, hello, Mary. We're ready to begin whenever you are. I was just going to wait a minute or two for others to show up. People still seem to be joining. I can hear you, and I believe it. Well, I'll go over some housekeeping things while we're waiting. Most important, we're going to go through the webinar. Mary will be talking, giving most of the presentation. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, there's an area in the chat window, the webinar chat, that you can enter in a question, and then we'll answer them as we can. It might be after the webinar or during, or of course you can always send us email if something comes up after the webinar also. But there is that questions option that you have in the webinar screen itself. There's also a chat feature. Now also during it, they have what they call polls. That means just questions we ask you will pop up a poll, and then quickly, give you 10, 15 seconds or whatever to answer that, and then, collect some information to help guide the webinar. And this webinar is really for your training purposes to get you up to speed on how to use SharePoint, Office 365 for NERC compliance. So hopefully it'll accomplish that. Now, Mary, do you think we're ready to go, or do you want to start introducing? I think we're okay, huh?
Yeah, we're ready to go. Go. Yeah.
All right, let's go then. Well, welcome to the SharePoint training for NERC Compliance Session 2. We had a session earlier in the January, and we'll have another one in March. And so there'll be 3 altogether. Mary will tell you what was covered, do a quick review of the first one, and probably a preview of the third one. So right now, let me introduce the 2 companies. We have Cooper Compliance, based in El Dorado Hills in California, out near Sacramento. Mary Cooper, electrical engineer for many years, has done consulting on NERC compliance, well versed in that, and she has developed this Global Audit Ready program in SharePoint. She got together with us in Crow Canyon here. This is Scott at Crow Canyon, Scott Restivo, and we have a help desk and asset management system. So the 2 together provide a very comprehensive NERC compliance situation, and already this is being installed at several utilities around the country and getting active use. This webinar itself is about how to use SharePoint and Office 365 for NERC compliance. It's not meant to promote or sell our particular solutions, but if you are interested in those, of course, we'd be very glad to hear from you and explain those and do demos on them. Just briefly, though, to get us started, Global Audit Ready that Cooper Compliance has developed in the SharePoint Office 365 world uses a kind of sophisticated set of controls to manage the compliance aspects. They also do NERC consulting, and there you can see there that they mock audits, training, audit preparation, control development. So both sides of it, the software side and the consultant side, are available through Cooper Compliance. And with Crow Canyon, we are SharePoint Office 365 application developers. We have a whole suite of applications that reside in SharePoint Office 365, help desk, and asset management, equipment tracking, onboarding, all kinds of things. And that blends itself to compliance situations quite well, in the sense for like tracking assets or people need training or onboarding people. So there's a lot of things that work together. We can go into that in more detail. But right now, let's focus. Go into that detail if you're interested and you want to hear more about these particular programs. But now we'll go into the training. So Mary, I'll go to the next slide and we'll review session 1.
In session 1, we went over we talked about best practices for storing documents. We talked about documents that are version control, how to name the documents, best name them, and putting in metadata. We talked about documents that are collected periodically, And also we discussed using logs in SharePoint for collecting evidence that can be used for compliance and using those logs real time. We discussed the fact that documents should be stored one time. In order to do this, we discussed a process-oriented approach to compliance where the processes are mapped to the requirement and the evidence is mapped to the processes. Now there's many benefits to using this methodology. One is that it ensures the documents are relevant and accurate. It reduces your subject matter expert's time and your time so that you spend a lot less time being a librarian and being able to focus more on compliance. Go to the next slide, Scott. So this is where we have the evidence is mapped to the process and the process is mapped to the requirement. That's the method that we use at Cooper Compliance. We also discussed Office Mix, which is a free add-on to PowerPoint. It has built-in controls to collect analytics. We use this Office Power Mix to enhance our procedures and provide training that our subject matter experts can take on their own pace. You can add voiceovers and add test questions. It's a really great product. And we also talked about the fact that by using Office Mix, you can quickly add new training into your program and get credit on your ICE because on your internal control evaluation, if you provide training with your procedures, you can get credit for that and demonstrating that you have more controls in your organization. If you want to see our last session, go to our website at coopercompliance.com and you can go to the tutorials and we have a recording from the last session. Okay. Next slide. So today, in today's session, similar to last session, we're going to cover two topics. In the first topic, we're going to learn how to use multi-part authentication with SharePoint. And then the second, we're going to learn how to customize your compliance program with SharePoint Designer for non-programmers. That's right, you don't have to be a programmer to use SharePoint Designer. So we're going to go over a few tips and tricks that I've used over the years as a non-programmer. We're going to go ahead and modify out-of-the-box forms to build in controls. We're going to show you how you can also add your metadata to a Word document and publish that metadata up to SharePoint for use later. We're going to also go build a workflow that uses a loop-through process. So go ahead and can we go back to the next previous slide, Scott? Okay, can you? Okay, there we go. Sorry. So we have some little clicking action that didn't just occur when we had. So, you know, what is multi-part authentication? Multi-part authentication is, first of all, is, you know, what you are. So this is where we're going to talk about multi-part authentication. So, you know, your retina scan or your fingerprint. It's what you have, and it's not how much money you have, but we're talking about having a token or some sort of code or certificate on your computer, and then what you know, your passwords and so forth. So let's go in and talk more about how you set up multi-part authentication on SharePoint. So first of all, I wanted to point out one thing is that multi-part authentication with SharePoint is not a requirement by NERC. The requirement, CIP 005, requirement 1.4 and 2.3, that requires multi-part authentication, discusses that you have to have authentication for dial-up connectivity to cyber assets, and then also for interactive remote access sessions. And this is to your BES cyber systems or protected cyber assets. It's highly unlikely that you're going to use SharePoint to access those systems. However, for CIP 011, it does require you to have protection on your BES cyber system information. And this is where you would probably store things like your station diagrams or your system diagrams that would be protected cyber system information. So using multi-part authentication is just one way of protecting that information. So next slide. Then, of course, last week we all received the NERC alert, and this is just another reason why we may want to consider turning on multi-part authentication in SharePoint. One of the recommendations was recommendation number 7, that you, for systems that are accessible via a VPN, you make sure that the VPN provides secure remote access with two-factor authentication. So if you want to meet that recommendation number 7, that's another reason why you would want to turn on multi-part authentication in SharePoint. So let's go to the next slide. So here, you know, one of the benefits, of course, for using multi-part authentication is that it's going to protect your credentials. You'll have a form of protection for your BS cyber system information. So it provides you a lot of controls to prevent people from accessing unwanted information, such as in the NERC alert. And in that NERC alert, when we discussed they discussed the attacks, they were talking about that they had gained access to credentials, so passwords and stuff like that, so it wasn't recognized. Now, a lot of us probably store passwords on our computer because we have so many. You know, I have a secret document hidden, well hidden, that I've kept some of my passwords on. I'm sure some of you are similar to that because you can't write it down. If you write it down, somebody could walk up and gain it. Now, we do have other tools available now. There's some applications that you can put on your iPhone for storing your passwords and securing them, but having multi-part authentication is just one way of protecting that information. Now, the disadvantage is that every time you sign in, you're going to have to get a text message or receive a phone call in order to get a code to log into your application. So, you know, that's the biggest disadvantage, is it's just inconvenient. Okay, next. Next slide. Okay, so with what I'm going to go over today is the Microsoft Windows Azure multi-part authentication. So the product works the same way whether you're using 365 or on-premise. First, you have the same multi-part authentication process occurs where you request the web page, you obtain the login from the provider, it requests a security token, the tokens validated, or the credentials validated with identifier or provider, then it's presented to the client submits a request to the second factor details and submits to the provider, then sends a token, and you create a security token, and then you can see, view the web page when it's sent. So it works the same way. I'm going to actually go over the setup next on using SharePoint 365 with Windows Azure. Now, one of the things, though, even though it works the same way, is if you are using on-premise, the Windows Azure multi-part authentication does require you to access the cloud in order to get the credentials. So what you can do is go in and whitelist that URL so that you can access it. So there's ways of providing security around it, but you will need to access the cloud to get the credentials if you're going to use Windows Azure on-premise. Okay, next slide. So how to set up multi-part authentication in SharePoint 365? Well, it's really easy for the administrators. For the administrators, you just turn on multi-part authentication. We'll show you how to do that in a second. For the users, you have to, it takes a little bit more. So once it's been turned on, you have to set up your multi-part authentication, determine do you want to receive it through a phone call or a text, and then after that, don't be surprised if you go to your Outlook and your other systems and your password isn't working. That's when I first turned it on. I didn't read all the instructions and had that experience. So all you have to do is go in. There's another area where you would set up an app password, and you want to set up an app password for every one of your applications, including the one that has your email on your smartphone. So you'll need to set up a separate app password for your smartphone. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm now signing in to my SharePoint, and I'm going to show you how we can set up multi-part authentication. So first of all, I'm signing in as myself as an administrator. And now I have to put in my code. I just got the code on I got a text on my cell phone, so let me put that in, 535952, and now I'm going to sign in. Okay, so I have multi-part authentication signed in, and this is the inconvenience that you run into. Okay. So now I went into my administrator area. I'm selecting users, and I'm adding all users. Then I'm going to set the area where it says multi-part authentication. I'm going to click Setup. Okay, now I bet you didn't know that Hillary Clinton moonlights for me, and she has a little problem with security. So we're going to turn on multi-part authentication for Hillary. So I just selected her name and then selected the option to turn it on. Okay. So now Hillary is going to now go in and sign in. So the first time she signs in, she's going to have to, it's going to give her the option to do a setup. There's a wizard that shows, so we're just going to sign in as Hillary. And see, now she has to do setup now. So go ahead and click setup now. And here I'm going to select send me a code by a text message, because using the call me option, you have to be in a place where you're going to receive that call. So sometimes if it goes into voicemail, you would never get the sign in. So I like the text option better. So now a text message is received. We're going to enter that message into the verification code. All right, now we're ready to set up our app passwords, and you can copy your first app password and start adding it, but I'm going to show you a little bit more how to go in and set up your more app passwords. So you go into the settings, and then you're going to select the option of Outlook there to get to, or Office 365 to get to this area, and then I selected the option to add an app password on the bottom, and here is where I can put in different phone numbers. I can actually select different options as I go along, but I selected the app passwords at the very top. It was kind of gray, hard to see. Now I'm going to put in my first app password. I'm going to put one in for my Outlook. So you want to name each of them, and now I'm going to copy this I'm going to put it on a notepad just so I can store it for later use. When after I sign out, I'm going to have to then go in and reset all of my Outlook and everything. And I'm going to set one up for my Skype, business for Skype. And then add that. And now I'm ready to go ahead and start adding those. So the next time, what you're going to have to do is sign out of your Outlook, sign out of your Skype, and then the next time you sign in, you just put in that app password. We can also set this so that we can change the times when you have to change the credentials. You know, we changed it to 45 days. So, you know, every 45 days, you're going to have to go ahead and put in a new app password. So we're just going to copy this in, and now Hillary can safely receive her email on her cell phone. So how to, we just covered how to set up multi-part authentication in SharePoint 2013 in the cloud. However, on-premise it's a little bit more difficult. You have to configure the multi-part authentication provider and this is what the administrator has to do. To use the Active Directory, then you have to download the Azure authentication software. After downloading, you need to generate activation credentials. You need to configure your server, activate it, configure the users, and then you need to choose ADFS as a method of notification, which is required by SharePoint. And then the next step is you need to select ADFS, install the ADFS, select a method for receiving your token, so phone, a text, mobile app, or authorization token. Then you need to configure your multi-part or multi-factor server settings for ADFS. Register the provider with ADFS services required by SharePoint. And then you need to configure your ADFS rules, edit the global multi-factor authentication, configure the users, devices, locations, and servers. And then, so you can see that the administrator has a lot more to do to set up multi-part authentication for on-premise. The user just goes through the same login process that we just went through for 365. Now I could spend, we're going to run out of time because we're going to cover a lot more here on using SharePoint Designer. So then rather than go over each of the steps for the administrator for multi-part authentication for your on-premise 2013 or 2010 servers, I'm going to refer you to this other link here. You can go to my slide and click on it, fast forward 45 minutes, and there's a 26-minute demo for SharePoint administrators where there's a very talented presenter that goes over each step-by-step. If you get stuck on anything, feel free to call me, and I'll do my best to try to help you through setting up multi-part authentication. So, Scott, are there any questions on?
Well, no, but let me point something out. ADFS, that stands for Active Directory Federated Services, just in case that wasn't mentioned before.
Okay.
Okay.
Are there anyone have any questions?
Oh, let's see. Have you done all of this private cloud? Have you done all of this as a private Azure cloud, not including running your solution? So private Azure cloud, we may have to address that after. But you certainly, well, yeah, if you had a private cloud, Azure cloud, it wouldn't be Office 365. It'd work the same way. It would work the same way, yeah. It would just be kind of like on-premises, but in the cloud. It's the same thing of Active Directory Federated Services. You'd be doing this kind of like on-premises but with a cloud kind of bent to it, but not in Office 365. What you showed earlier on Office 365 is very exclusive to Office 365 due to their
right. But the location where you would download the software is the same. It's in the same location in your SharePoint. If you were using because you can use a cross in between on-cloud and on-premise, and so that software is still there in the same location where I showed you earlier, where I was setting up my passwords. The presenter that you're going to see at this SharePoint conference from the 2014. If you go to that presenter actually uses the Azure product in that demo, so it should be pretty helpful. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so. All right, so now I'm going to...
Mary, did you want to pop up the question about what version of SharePoint people are using? Because that seems like something that affects the way... Let's just take a moment to do that. What does that sound like? If people don't mind...
Yeah, let's do that.
What version of here's a poll about what version of SharePoint you're using. Give you 10 or 15 seconds to answer that. That helps guide us as to what kind of training is important and useful, and if people are using. So I'm going to launch.
And I can.
There it goes.
Right, and I can do some walk around or talk about some different options of how to go through this, the workflows and such that I'm going to show you here in a minute.
Yeah. We'll kind of go into section 2 here, building controls with SharePoint Designer, but the multi-factor authentication is a way to add an extra layer of security to the whole NERC compliance. Well, actually, not even NERC, even. It could be anything in SharePoint that you want to keep secure. I mean, of course, it applies to NERC compliance, but it could be financial records, HR records, health records, whatever particular business you're in. It applies. It's not particular to NERC compliance, right, Mary? It applies to just about any security need to have that multi-factor authentication as an extra layer, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like I spoke of earlier, a lot of people save their credentials, their passwords, somewhere in their on their computer, and so being able to protect that information is really important.
Okay, it looks like most people have voted. Let's go to voted or answered the poll. So let's go close this and show the results. Let's see, share. I should see it on the screen. I don't think I see it on mine, but you guys should see. The majority of people by far are in SharePoint 2010. Some are in 2013, and Office 365 is pretty low adoption at this point. But that's the future. Seems to be more and more people going towards Office 365, so that may grow. But right now, 2010 and 2013 are, in our experience, where most people are using these programs. And a lot of people are moving out of 2010 into 2013, or the upcoming 2016 coming out. Actually, the release to manufacture is RTM version of that is in March. So by spring.
Yeah, we probably should have asked a question about who's going to be changing from 2010 to 2013, but I'm certain that all of you will in the future. I'm going to actually, in the next presentation, I'm going to really kind of dive in a little bit about the SharePoint 2013. I am going to discuss the differences between using SharePoint 2013 and 2010 workflows, because 2013 makes it a lot easier if you're going to be using SharePoint Designer.
Right. You can go ahead with do you see the screen, building controls with SharePoint Designer now? You're all set to go for that, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
let's move forward. Next slide.
Okay. Let me get over here. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. Did I skip one? I think I skipped one. Let me go back. Wait a minute. How did I get way over here? Hold on a second. Give me a second and I'll get back to the right slide. Which slide am I supposed to, do you know what number I'm supposed to be on?
Okay, I think this is it.
There we go.
So
this one right here. Here we go.
Yeah. Is a tool that you can use if you're not a programmer. It's a free software. You have Designer 2013 will not work with SharePoint 2010, so I am going to demo SharePoint 2013 today. Now SharePoint 2013, when they converted over from 2010 to 2013, you lost a few features that you had in Designer 2010. However, in the 2013 version, they allow you to select and add a workflow that will work with SharePoint Designer 2010. One of the features that is completely lost is that in 2010 it does have two different views where you can see the code view and the form view, and so it makes it a little easier to drag and drop fields in if you're not a programmer. But I'd have to say that it's very clumsy, it's very difficult to use using the drag and drop features that they have. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about 2013, which includes a loop capability and dictionary functions. Those were added. They're really cool features. If you're going to, so one of the key things that I'll talk about today is that as you go through and develop the loop function, and we're going to show you this in 2013, the trick to make it work in 2010 is you have to have two workflows. So I have two lists that I generally use. One where the last thing I do in the first workflow that does the horsepower and does all calculations and everything that I want it to do and sends out emails is the last thing I do is I do an update to another list where I pause for 5 minutes, and then I have a workflow running on that other list that after pausing for 5 minutes it will update my next workflow, which will start on change, and the first workflow, so two workflows. A does the horsepower, B is going to do nothing other than reset another field so that I can kick that workflow off. It's a little clumsy, doesn't work as well as the loop functions in SharePoint 2013, but it's a great workaround. So if you need to see this a little bit more, we can maybe add it to our next webinar, because I think we'll run out of time if I try to go through everything today. So what we're going to do in our scenarios is, the first scenario is, you can go to the next slide like you were, is we're going to go over and do a workflow to ensure authorized users have met requirements. So we're actually only going to look at the training portion of the workflow. Crow Canyon has developed a solution for ensuring your authorized users have met all of the requirements under CIP 004 and all of the CIP requirements. It's very complex, so it covers, you know, have they completed the training? Do they have a need to know? Has the manager done their review, their 45-day review? If somebody leaves an organization or switches jobs, it goes through the entire process. So just to let you know that Crow Canyon has that product, we're just going to look right now just at the training portion. So we're going to set up a SharePoint list of users. We're going to use the workflow to send out reminders and develop some custom forms. So let's go ahead and, so here I'm in my SharePoint list, and I've developed an employee list. I want to show you what the settings are. Just to save time, I set this up in advance. So for the title field, I set this up so that it has a view as the, I just put in view because as a nuisance, it's a required field. I can't do anything with it, so I just put it in as view. Okay, and then see, for the version history, I added version history so that I can collect changes. So I selected append changes to existing text right down there. So for that one, what I'm going to do is use a workflow that goes in the background, and every time I make a change, it logs it to that version history. So now I can have a view. Now, if I want to view it, I have to click on each item, and I would be able to see it. So in next month's session, I'm going to create a web page where you can actually see all the entries for the last test record. You can then use that for demonstrating compliance. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add an app for taking our test. So I'm going to add a document library. I'm going to call it the cybersecurity training. Okay, so what we're going to do is after they go through training, we're going to have them go in and log some information into a form here so we can collect it as evidence. So I'm going to select settings. I'm going to make this, I'm going to go in the advanced settings, and I am going to make it a content type. I'm also going to select the option to open in the browser so that some of the features that I'm going to use in my form, in my content type form, won't work in the browser, so I'm going to do that. Now I need to go ahead and add from an existing site content. I'd already set up a content type called 2016 test. I'm going to add that. And now what I want to do is get rid of the document content type that automatically comes with the SharePoint. So we're going to change the order. I need to make it in the second position, so it's not the primary first. And then I can now go and edit it and delete it out. So we're going to select the option to delete delete it. So I deleted it out, and now I just have my 2016 test. So now I'm going to add an employee field. I'm going to select the type. I selected the employee list from our Active Directory, and then now I'm going to add a test date. Oh, actually, for the employee, I didn't select it from the Active Directory. I just made it a text type because we're going to use, in reality, what I'm going to do is use the use another option for that. So, okay. So I added, one of the things you notice is I added the content type after I said add to all content type. I added these fields after I added my form. That way it will show with all my content types. That was really important because now the next step is I'm going to go in, I'm going to edit that 2016 test and add those fields to the test. So I'm going to select my 2016 test and just click on that. And then I'm going to go into advanced settings, and then I'm going to select the edit the template. So this is a template that I developed already. And here I can now go into quick parts from the document properties. I'm going to add my employee that I just added, and then I can also add that test date that will also be in the quick parts. So we'll go ahead and go to the quick parts and again add that test date. So now once I've done this, anytime somebody fills out that form, I'm going to save this back up to SharePoint. Anytime somebody fills in their name or the test date, it's going to show up on that in that library under those two fields. So we're going to run a workflow that when somebody enters the test results in and puts in their name, it will go through and update the employee list. So now when I add a new record, it's going to take and put the name in there. It's going to update the employee list with the last test date, and then now this is a form, and we're going to have our training manager is going to be able to go in and change the test results. But here you can see they can edit all the fields. So what I want to do is develop a form for my training manager where she can't change the employee's name, or doesn't need to know if they had, when the last time they had required access, or if they have required access. We don't want her to modify the version history or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead now and show you how you can use SharePoint Designer to edit those fields, so that only field that the training manager will be able to change is the test results. So I'm going to open up SharePoint Designer, And whether you're using 2010 or 2013, the first thing you need to do is reference your site. So we're going to put in our demo site, the Cooper Compliance demo site address. I'm going to select the workflows, or the lists, I mean, and then I'm going to, and here I am going to add a new form. So we're going to call this form test results. And I'm going to make it an edit item form. And now I'm going to edit the form. And I'm about ready to see a bunch of foreign language. So it's kind of like going to Italy, knowing a few words like how to find the bathroom or, you know, restaurant, and still having a great time. But I'm going to show you how you can go in here as a non-programmer and make some minor changes to display the field versus editing it. I'm also going to show you how you can delete some of the forms. So first thing I'm going to do is search for a word or a field that I know, like test results. Now I can go, and this whole section includes all the different fields that are going to display. So the first one, I'm going to go ahead and delete the title field. I don't need that title field, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then I'm going to just change under control mode. You see where it said edit. I'm going to change that word to display. So I'm doing that for each of the fields that I just want to display. So this is the employee, and now I'm just changing the training date to display. I'm going to keep the test results as edit, and so we'll keep that as edit in the control mode and change others to display. Here I've got my required access and my required access review date fields from the TR to the TR. That's the key, is those two sections. And so you can see it has the same pattern. Just need to highlight those and delete it out. Okay, so one of the things that you want to consider, I'm going to delete my version history too, is, and so we'll keep some other information. One of the things you need to consider is, you know, I wouldn't do this on a production environment library because if you make a mistake, your form may not work anymore, and so, you know, just make sure you do this on a library that you don't have to have that data. So isn't this great? Now I can view the name, I can view everything else, but I can only change the test results. So it's very simple to modify and customize a form that provides you that additional control to prevent people from changing items that you don't want them to change. Okay, now we're going to go into building the workflows. So I'm going to select workflows. I'm going to do a list workflow, and we're going to run the list workflow on our new library that we just our new list that we just created, the cybersecurity training. So I'm going to run this every time I have a new cybersecurity training record, and this is the one that's going to update the employee list. Now, so one of the first steps we're going to do is we're going to set up an action, or you can see here, SharePoint Designer has, you can set up actions or controls. It has a lot of out-of-the-box features that makes it very easy. You just click on the items that you want, do a calculation, add time to date, whatever, and you can go ahead and put in that information. So we're going to do here, we're adding, we're going to set up a variable. I'm going to create a new variable that's a string type, and we're going to call it link to record. So what I'm going to do is create a hyperlink. So I can create a hyperlink that will update the employee list with the last test record. So when my training manager goes in, she can, or he can just click on that and we'll open it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is use the encoded absolute URL value that gives a link to that SharePoint. And then you're going to put a comma and a space, and now you can put a text in there that you want to display. So we'll call it view record. close it. Okay, now we're just going to put in a action type of update my list item. So we're going to go ahead and select update list item. Okay, and now we're going to go ahead and add a couple fields. I'm going to add my employee list. I'm going to add or select my employee list as a list I'm updating. I'm going to update the last test record. And we're going to put in that variable that we just created, the link to record. Or this is for the annual training date, actually. Switched over. Let's do the date first, and then we'll add in the last test record and do the variable. Link to record as a string. Okay, now I need to select which field I'm going to update. So I'm going to update where the employee, so that this is from the link employee list, where the employee is equal to the created by. So the only person that should be taking that test or filling that out is the person that's logged in taking it. So that's why I use that. Now I need to just put in a stage to go to end on my workflow. This is something in 2013 where you can go from stage to stage. In SharePoint Designer you can't. Now I'm going to allow the workflow to automatically start when an item's changed or created, and now I publish it out. So now anytime I add a new record, it will go ahead and update that employee list. This is just a very simple workflow. The next workflow that we're going to do that loops through a list is going to be a lot more complex. So now I'm going to add a new record, and we'll see how this, or this is what, I think we kind of went backwards. Can you go back?
Oh, do you want the other slide back, Mary?
Yeah, we kind of, yeah. So, you know, why don't we do this? Why don't we just, can we maybe?
You're way over here, I think. Right? I think I accidentally clicked the wrong.
Yeah.
Where were we? Right about here?
Yeah, so we're filling in the name, and then we're publishing that out to SharePoint. Okay, now I can look at my employee list, and I can see that the test results is review required, and the test date was updated. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is create the site workflow. So I selected a site workflow, and we're going to call that training validation workflow. Okay, and you notice there the platform type, it says SharePoint 2013. You can do it SharePoint 2010 in 2013 as well. So a few steps here that we're going to use is you know, again, this is a little bit more of a complex workflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a set a time field in here, and the set a time field, we're going to set it a variable to today with the value of 0. So at midnight today, we're going to collect all records that were new. We're going to run this every 24 hours. The next variable I'm going to set up is a URL to reach out to my site.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong. I got to get you back again. I'm sorry for that. I just trying to keep you. Here we go. Sorry, my bad. It's my bad. It's not you, Mary. It's me. So we got here to where we're building a workflow, a site workflow, which is different than a list workflow, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So a site workflow runs on the whole site, and the idea here is you're trying to get it to be timed for that site so it takes some effect on the list. Is that's what we're doing here, right?
Yeah, so the site workflow, the reason why we're using that is because it's going to work on the entire list, not just one list item. So I'm setting up this URL right now.
Right. We're getting to where you were.
Yeah.
Kind
Sorry, I have to admit I cheated and pre-recorded some of this because I wanted to make sure that I clicked the right thing during the presentation. It's kind of hard to talk and do this at the same time. So there's Art. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's good. It's a good time anyway if people absorb information about list flow versus a site workflow. Now you're creating a site workflow that's going to run on a timed basis to check. What's the purpose of checking that's the time you want to?
Well, the difference, okay, so the difference between the site workflow and the list workflow is the site workflow runs on an individual item in the document. So when a new document's added or a new document's changed, the site workflow runs on the entire list, the entire light. So I want to be able to use my loop function where I can cause this to go off by the first time I'm going to manually set off the workflow, and then it's going to go ahead and run my loop, and then it's going to run through my dictionary, grab all the items from my dictionary, and then I'm going to set up a time. So I'm going to pause for 24 hours, and then I'm going to run it again. So I can just keep looping through that process. So I really only have to set it off one time.
Okay, and the purpose is to check on training if people have done the training, right?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're checking to make sure that the training manager wants to know, hey, do I have any new records today? Now, you can use this same type of concept for, and I do this with a lot of different standards. For example, PRC 5, I have an equipment list, and in my equipment list I have a workflow that runs through and checks to see, are there any new records that are due? And you could do the same thing. I want to know, is there, do I have a list of employees, and is it time to validate if they still have a need to know? Well, this option what I can do is I can create a record that includes a list of all equipment. So, you know, if you're doing maintenance at a substation, you generally do maintenance every time. You wouldn't want to receive an email for every piece of equipment in that substation that was maintained at that same date, because we're adding, you know, 6 years, and then, or if it's batteries or whatever. So what we want to do is just send one email that has a list that includes everything that is in that entire list that meets a certain condition. So that's what we're doing here with our URL. So the first thing I did was I'm building a URL, and the URL, the first portion is I'm making it set to my SharePoint site. Then I needed to add the _API web list, and then I'm going to get by title, and then I'm going to put employee list. So this is JSON language. So I don't know much about JSON language.
It's JavaScript object notation is what it means.
Yeah, and I am not a JSON programmer, but I can Google and I can find all kinds of information on it. So one of the things, and actually I refer to my programmer and ask him to figure this out. So one of the things with using this, the dictionaries in SharePoint, is that it's limited to the number of records it can hold. So the next thing is I put in the top 2,000. So that forces it to expand and be able to accept more than just a couple hundred records. If you're querying a list that has thousands of records in it, you want to be able to query the entire list. The next portion is I'm doing a filter, and I'm setting the filter so that the annual training date is greater than or equal to the time, the date variable that we just created. So it's greater than or equal to today at midnight. So I'm going to set this workflow, obviously, to run right before midnight, so on a normal basis, so that it would collect every record that's been changed that day. So this is just a way of filtering it out to be able to get to the next record. So let's go ahead and...
Now, Mary, you said there was no programming involved, and you talked to your programmer. Isn't that cheating a little bit?
I'm giving you the key and the tricks here, so this is free. The key is to
talk to your programmer, apparently. Yeah. All right, let's go on
again,
with this.
Yeah. So in review, we put in the our URL for our website, Yeah, add this list information. You got to spell the title of your list exactly right. So if you put a space, you got to put a space in it. Select. You're going to filter it for the top 2,000. We're going to set the filter. You can I'm showing you a date variable. You can filter it for all kinds of different things. So, okay. And then once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and select OK. And then the next step is we're going to use the action called build dictionary. Again, here is some JSON code that you have to put in the word accept in content type, and you have to put in this code. I don't know what the code does, but it works. You just put it in exactly like that, application / JSON, and so we're putting in application / JSON semicolon OData equals verbose. And I have a slide at the end that's going to have that this code in here, so you can just copy and paste it in. And then we had to have a dictionary variable. We're going to output this to a dictionary variable, and it created one called dictionary. The next step is we're going to do a call to that dictionary. So I'm going to do a call HTTP services, and here the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up where it says this. We're going to put in the variable, our employee URL variable that we just created. And then after I get that in there, employee URL, it's just a string. And then we're going to skip over that one that says request. Don't check that, but it does go to the response. And here we're going to have create a new dictionary called employee list content. And that's a dictionary type as well. And then we need to have the response headers, and we're going to put a dictionary type for response headers as well. We're just going to call it response headers. And the last step is you go over and click at the very end, and you're going to select the properties box, and you need to, where it says request headers, you're going to put that variable dictionary. So the dictionary built some headers. It's just required for this set of these actions that come in a set. You have to use all these actions together. The next one, you need to use get an item from your dictionary. So we're going to select get an item from our dictionary. We're going to put in, again, the code D/results, some JSON code. Just put it in exactly the same, no matter what you're doing. Now we're going to put a dictionary variable called employee list content. So that's going to include all the content from that employee list. And last content, there we go. And then the last one is we're going to create a dictionary called employee list. Okay, so I'm getting the results from my employee list content where I called it above, and I'm going to put it into another dictionary called employee list. So the next thing I need to know is how many items are in that employee list. So the next step is to add a count items variable. So I'm going to add the action to count the number of items in my employee list, and I'm going to put it in a variable called count. So now I've created all the actions to get the variable. So the next step is I'm going to create a new variable. We're going to start doing the loop workflow. I want to put in a set variable list index. And this is just a variable that will increment each time I go through the list so that I know which record in my list to look at. So we're going to have this be an integer type, and we're going to make it equal to 0. You always start out with 0. I would think it would start it out as 1, but the directions say to start with 0. Now we put in the loop. We're going to repeat our new variable count times. Okay. Now I'm going to get an item from my employee list dictionary one item at a time. So to set this up in the item by name path, you select the three little dots so you can open the string builder. You do an open quote and then add that variable that we just created, the variable list index, and then you close quote, then put a slash, and now we're going to put employee ID. Employee ID is, you remember my employee list includes the word employee, but we're going to use employee ID because the employee is a lookup. And then we're going to make this equal to a variable called employee ID, and this is going to be a string variable. Now I can copy this get action now. That's another feature that you can do in SharePoint Designer 2013 that you can't do in 2010 is copy variables. They made this real convenient. Now I'm going to add test results because that's another field that I want to get. So change that to test results, and then I'm going to make that equal to, and I'm getting it from my employee list, and I'm going to make it to a variable called test results, which can also be a string. Okay, now I'm ready to, here when I'm doing the employee, where I'm getting it is I'm getting it from the employee, and we're going to do the employee ID. So I'm looking in the list and getting the employee from the employee ID variable because in my list, again, it's listed as an ID versus the actual employee name, even though it's viewed as an employee name. The next step is I'm going to set up some conditions. So I want to say anytime the test result equals the, so I'm going to select test results. So my variable test results, anytime that test result is equal to review required, then I'm going to add it to another string variable. So I'm going to start building the list of names of people who have taken the test that day. Okay, so I'm going to create a workflow variable. It's going to be a string variable. And I'm going to set it to the variable employees to review, and we're going to select the variable employee. We're going to add that in there. Now, this variable that I just created called variables employee to review, I'm going to actually add that variable to itself. So we're going to add it in here. So now as I loop through, each time I'm adding another person to that, the list at the end of the day, that employees to review will contain a list of all employees. So the next section thing is to do is we need to set the variable list index to increment by 1. So I'm doing a calc variable, and I'm just going to add 1 to it. So I'm going to, and then after I added the 1, then I needed to set another variable called list index, and I'm going to set that to that variable calc so I can get that back in there. So now my list index is incremented by 1 at each time I go through. The next step is to send an email. So we're going to send an email to the training manager. I'm going to step out of my loop because I've now looped through and got all my employees. I'm going to select training manager. I like to use a training manager group so that if you have multiple training managers, they will all receive that email. Anybody in that training manager group will receive the email. Or if your training manager leaves, you can just simply replace it in the work. You don't have to do anything to the workflow. So for the subject, you can add variables there. We're just going to go ahead and type out an email, something that I want my training manager to receive, and then we're going to add that variable that we just listed or created called employees to review. So the following employees have completed their cybersecurity training exam and are ready for review or something like that. And now I'm just going to select add or change, and I'm going to get a lookup. I'm going to go to my workflow variables, and now I'm going to select the variable employees to review. So now my email's done. Okay, so we're almost done. We need to add another stage where in this, and I'm adding another stage because this way I can do a little test on my workflow. Here's where we're going to pause for our for 1 day, and the last thing I need to do is set up my stages. So got to set up a stage, go to action. Here we're going to go to stage 1 because we would loop through and go back to stage 1. For the second stage, I'm going to actually end the workflow, but normally I would go back after I get done. I would change it to stage 3, but just for testing, I don't want to continue to loop, so I would just go ahead and end it right there. And now here you just go to stage 2, and now we're ready to publish, and we can publish out our workflow. And this is just a simple workflow. It can get a lot more complex than this. I just wanted to go over how you can gather all that information from an entire list and build a dictionary so that you have the names of all your employees. Now, there's tricks on how you can do this, again, using SharePoint 2010, where I can have that other list. I can actually build out that list of as I'm going through the design, looping through my workflow, bouncing back in between each. I can continue to build out the names of employees, the equipment, or whatever, and then pull that in as a lookup value into my email. Again, it doesn't work that great sometimes because SharePoint, one of the things with SharePoint Designer is it takes a little bit of babysitting, because if you get some sort of system interruption that causes your workflow to end, there's not a lot of controls in SharePoint Designer that are going to allow you to know that your workflow had a problem. But again, Crow Canyon has created a solution that has all those bells and whistles that will let you know if something's happened to your workflow. It will work, it will provide you control, and it covers all of the steps, going through and making sure that your employees have taken their tests, their annual exam, do they still have a need to know, and so forth. And so now to start your workflow, you got to go into site content and select site workflows. And from here, you just select training validation workflow. Okay, so now we've created that workflow. It's running now, and then this is what the email result would look like. I only had 2 employees in there. That go ahead and just select next slide. So we can go to the next slide. And so here we had 2 employees in there, and this is what the email would look like. We had the 2 employees in there. So what we learned from review for CIP 004-5A is that we learned how to develop a form to allow only certain fields to be edited. We changed the word edit to display using SharePoint Designer. We also learn how to add metadata to a Word document and have that metadata publish out into your SharePoint list. We learned how to develop a workflow to update fields in another list when a new item is added, and we customize a list workflow to update that list item, and then we also developed the loop workflow. Next slide. So for the loop workflow list items, we identified the items that met a certain condition. So we customized the site workflow using SharePoint Designer. We created the URL with the filters. And then we had to add the build action, call HTTP, get dictionary services, all the count items in dictionary. Those 4 actions need to all be created for this whole sequence to work. And then we did we looked up and looked at the number count times. We looped through. Got a spelling here. Here we loop through count times and loop to get the individual items from each dictionary to create that list where we can now send out an email. So I think it's a pretty cool capability. Here's the JSON voodoo magic that you have to have behind it. So here's a couple, next 2 slides just include some code that you can use to reference later. So we'll let you just look at that later. Okay, so are there any questions that from the crowd now on? I saw somebody mentioned I had a spelling error earlier.
Azure, yeah, A-Z-U-R-E, it's easy. Color, blue. Anyway, no, there aren't any questions on it. I think people have a lot to absorb if they want to get into SharePoint Designer at the level that that's at. So they may, may have more questions later when they have time to look at it, but there aren't any at this point. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, and just going back again, SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. 2013 does offer those loop functions. Unfortunately, there is about 50% of you that are on 2010, so you're not, yeah, I can, and maybe on the next training session I can go a little bit more and show you how you would do the same thing with 2010. It's very clumsy, but it does work. It gets the job done. If you need to create a quick form or a quick workflow, SharePoint Designer is a great tool to go there. However, again, Cooper Compliance, we have our applications for managing compliance. One of the things I would have done in this workflow is, first of all, I wouldn't have used a Word document to display the, for my test, I would have used Office Mix. And,
wait a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a question about, can we see the results of the workflow? Results being that, what maybe just go, with the results. I guess would be this email, but in context of what? So what actually happened?
So,
at the high,
yeah, so we did go and we solved.
Level.
Yeah, so the email here, this is the results. I sent an email, and in this email, this is where we had, remember we had the, I think, employees to review. This was built because it looped through that list. There's a list of 4 people, but only 2 of them had, it was time to review their test. It only showed me that it listed everybody that needed a review. The other workflow went in and updated it updated the list item. If let me see, if you want to make me a presenter, we do have a little bit of extra time. I could log in and show you a little bit more.
Sure, I'll make you a presenter. It's past the hour, so some people are heading out, which is fine. But there's always can view the webinar later, recording later, or ask questions. But I'll make you presenter right now. Go ahead. There you go.
Okay. Okay, so I'm logging in right now. Sorry. While I'm doing that, why don't you instead, can we just go over some of those survey questions, and I'll...
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, if anybody wants to answer. I mean, let's see. I guess one question is, do you have a product now for using? Let's launch that one.
You probably need to make yourself a presenter again.
No. It launched it. When you're the presenter, you don't see the poll, but I see it here. It's just a simple question. Do you have a product you're using now for NERC compliance, real-time status? And most people say no. I mean, it's 75% on the no here. So I guess one of the reasons to attend the webinar is to find out what the choices are for what the options are, whether SharePoint is a good option or whatever. So yeah, good. Well, thank you for answering that. I'll close that right now.
Yeah, and we do have the Cooper Compliance product is really great because with these workflows, one of the things we do is when something is due, it actually changes the status to task open. So you can have one dashboard where you can look and know where everything is. And I'm having a problem typing my name. There we go. And go ahead and launch another one here. And I'll be in 2 seconds. I just got to receive my code. 438903. Okay, so, okay, I don't know if you can see my screen now.
Yeah, I see it says audit ready, utility company, governance, risk, and compliance SharePoint solution.
Okay, so just one of the things that happened was we had built the cybersecurity training, and when I added this record, it actually started the workflow and ran the workflow. So I can go here and look at my workflow and see that it ran. And now what I can do is just rerun this and you'll see exactly what happens. But I went in here and ran that workflow and it did the update when the new record was added. I'm going to go here back to my Cooper Compliance site. And I'm just going to change, I'm going to modify that record and then run the workflow again. So you can see, you know, when the item's added, it will run the workflow and just go ahead and update that employee list. And there's actually two that are going to run here. So I'm going to just change this date to something different. And we'll just change this to fail. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and go back over here and run this workflow again. And that will go ahead and update that list. Okay, so let's go to our employee list and do it. Might take a second. Ran already. Still didn't run. It's going slow right now. One of the things, though, I wanted to show you here is the version history. When I ran that, the other workflow that was running, see, every time I added a new item, it went through and collected this data. So I can show that, you know, you can set this up however you want, but it's showing all the records that were changed. And I have that now for my record. And let's see here. Hopefully I didn't modify that workflow getting ready for this. I might have. I'll just make sure you're on. But that workflow will change the record in, hopefully I didn't play around with it and modify it while I was getting ready, but we'll go ahead and look at that workflow and make sure. Oops. And then the other workflow was, okay, so 11:18, it just completed. Oh, it changed the date, but it didn't change my test result. So I had a little issue with that. I think probably because I had to add the new record, and it didn't get changed over on the other one, but it did change the date. So it did run. It's probably just the way I had the workflow set up. And then the other one, it just sent it sends an email. It sends an email when if I ran this, and let's say that this is review required. Right now we only have one that's running. I would just go into my site content, and then when I go to site workflows and I run that, it will loop through. This time it will only give me one person on the list because it ran one time. But that's how that would work.
Okay, I hope that answers the question, but
give me the results.
It's really good to see that in the real visual world than just that back-end training designer, because that gets like sort of mind-numbing a bit. But to see it actually happening, it's like, oh yeah, there's some purpose to this and positive result. But I think, you know, we took up, we're at 1 hour and 20 minutes, so probably more of the time than people expected to be here. So
now, one of the things is that we are available if you have some customized workflows that you would like to have built. Both Cooper Compliance and Crow Canyon are capable of doing that. We have some out-of-the-box add-ons to SharePoint that will very quickly get you ahead. So we'd love to hear if you are interested in getting a demo. Here's my email that just came in. I'll show you that email. Now this time it had one person versus 2 on the last one because review required was not an option. So, okay. So and again, this is not necessarily the way I would set this up. I would probably use the Office Mix option and brought that data in from Office Mix, ran a workflow on that list to update the employee list to show me, you know, who's required for training. But it's a great way to build in controls. So please feel free to contact myself or Scott. Scott, did we want to go back to, I think we just want to wrap up this.
Yeah, we can wrap it up. Just basically coopercompliance.com, crowcanyon.com. Both those places. We do this all day long. Mary does the electrical industry, NERC compliance type consulting and the kind of work she saw her doing today with the workflows. And Crow Canyon is doing all kinds of interesting stuff in SharePoint and Office 365. We have a whole platform we built of web parts and add-ins and capabilities that extend basic SharePoint and Office 365 in many interesting ways with the forms, the workflows, the reporting tools. And we use those to build solutions for companies all over the world, including the electrical industry and atomic energy agencies and education and government and military and yada yada. So we do a lot of that. We'd be very interested in talking to you more about it. Unfortunately, we don't have a slide with your screen with the phone numbers, but coopercompliance.com, Crow Canyon, Crow, C-R-O-W, Canyon.com. Either one of those, you go to those websites. I think that's it, though. Thank you for attending and spending this much time with us, and hope to hear from you and hope this training was useful. And again, like Mary said, contact us with any questions or comments, and we'll put the webinar up and mail it to you, a recording of it, so you can have a way to stay in touch with us. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, right? Rest of the day. Okay, bye.